friends, here I am, Tanis, back again with another uncut video with Tanis. I'm a knitwear designer and a yarn dyer. I have a line of yarns called Tanis Fiber Arts. I talk about all the projects I'm working on, both personally and professionally, I guess, with the business on this YouTube channel. And then I also occasionally answer questions about knitting, yarn, whatever that you ask me via my Instagram stories. So today it's going to be a little combo of the two. I'm going to tell you what I'm working on. I'm going to talk about a project that I finished a couple months ago, but that I haven't spoken about here. So let's jump into it. First of all, what I'm wearing my truss shawl. It is my favorite spring, fall, like transitional weather scarf. I wear it in the winter also, depending on the weather. It's fingering weight, a single skein. It's knit from tip to tip. It's a shallow V, and this fun cable and fringe is knit at the same time as the shawl, so you don't apply all the fringe afterwards. It's really like cast on, cast off, boom, total shawl done. I love the cable and fringe. I think it adds just the right amount of like whimsy and boho fun. I just love this shawl. It works in any color, something speckled, something variegated, something solid, a luxurious like cashmere sock yarn, or this was a merino nylon sock yarn in a one-of-a-kind colorway that I had. So it's the perfect project for that sort of thing. And the fingering weight, since it makes it for like a lighter weight shawl, I love it I look forward to wearing it, in the spring, because it means the weather has warmed up a little bit and I can pull out my lighter weight knits. It's like a highlight of my year. So that's what I'm wearing, my truss shawl. And the first project I want to talk about today is this. Oh my goodness, I'm sitting on it. Well done. So this, I mentioned it last week when I was answering, one of the questions was like, do you ever get overwhelmed or burnt out or something like that? And the answer I gave was that yes, of course I do, just like anybody else. And that what I do to sort of get myself motivated again is I knit, or in this case crochet, something scrappy and colorful. That's really just my happy place. And it always gets me into trouble because I made this using 80 colorways of leftover DK weight yarn. And everybody wants a kit, and it's just not possible. 80 colors, like only uses probably about 10 grams of each color. It's just like, this is a, work from stash, not a kittable thing for me. There's other companies, probably commercial companies, that make little things like this. But anyways, don't ask me for a kit. It's never say never, but it's incredibly unlikely. It's the type of thing that I imagine if ever, I don't think this would ever happen for us, but if we did become a larger business and I had employees, I feel like I would definitely have somebody who was just in charge of winding mini skeins, and I feel like that job would be hard to fill because it sucks. It's so boring. Anyway, if I had help winding mini skeins, then like if we were winding mini skeins all day, every day, then maybe that would be possible to have things like this available. But while it's just me, it's like never gonna happen. So anyway, the pattern is called the Sunburst Granny Square. If you Google Sunburst Granny Square, there are a ton of tutorials on how to do it. I just used a free tutorial for the actual square. And a lot of the examples you'll see will use a different color for every round, right? Like a center, and then this, so this would be like 4 colors. I just did each one in a single color, and then I sewed them all together using mattress stitch. I didn't know you could mattress stitch in crochet, but I learned that for this project, that you totally can, and that it's my favorite way to join crocheted blocks at this point. Projects I've done in the past, I've joined them where I've done 2 other options. One where I crochet them together through the back, and I don't like that method as much personally because it makes the seams really tighter. There's not a lot of stretch, and I just don't like it as much, and it's also bulkier on the back. What's really nice about the mattress stitch is the back is really just as nice as the front. It's totally flat. The other thing that I've done is I've done a pattern where if like the outside round of each square is the same color, then you sort of knit all of your centers and then you join them all together as you go. Actually, I guess they don't have to be the same color to do that. You just have to be aware that that's your plan. Every time you add a new color, you join them. Anyways, you join as you go. And as much as that is also a fun way to do it, but I find that I just like making the squares. I just like making squares, piling them up, and then in the end I'll sew them together. It's like, it was probably like 2 evenings of sewing. You know, it's quite a bit of sewing, but absolutely worth it if you ask me. I love the results. It's my favorite probably crocheted blanket that I've made so far in terms of sort of like comfort and function. I chose it because it's pretty dense, right? Like there's certainly holes, but I've made crocheted blankets in the past that are really very holey and I just don't find them as comfortable, I guess. Like I wouldn't really use them I don't use them as much on my lap. Your toes stick out, you've got just air circulating everywhere. Like I like a denser blanket. So I love how this turned out. As I say, 80 colors, so 8 by 10. As you can see, I mean, I don't know the actual measurements off the top of my head, but like it's close to 5 feet, not quite, probably more like 4 feet wide because that's about my wingspan. My wingspan is probably 5 feet, and this is like not it. Oh, I can see I have something in my hair. Fluff. So it's a really nice lap size for me, and I just really love it. I really adore it, and it really did. I made this really fast because once I started, it's just impossible to stop. You just keep making stacks and stacks of beautiful little squares, and I just wanted to keep going, right, and seeing like how many squares I could make. So I grabbed all my leftover colorways of DK, and I think I have something like 75 different leftover colorways of DK weight yarn, mostly pure wash DK. Probably, and some leftover superwash DK from like pre-2016 when we used to dye superwash, but most of it would be pure wash. And then I have 2 squares. This bright pink one and this goldenrod one are Highland DK. So in person, I don't know if you can tell in the video, but in person they're a slightly different texture because they're woollier. They're just a different fiber, but it works together beautifully. Like I don't think that that's great. You know, love it. I also, this one, I think there's 2. This square, this pretty green, is 2 strands of fingering weight held together. Oh, there's a couple actually. That one, and then this bright one is 2 strands of fingering held together as well. I did a couple of 2 strands of fingering held together, but I found I wanted to be careful. I had to use, you know, not all fingering weight is created equal, right? Some is a little bit thinner, some is a little bit thicker and fluffier. So I preferred the ones that were a little bit thinner because I know people say 2 strands of fingering equals DK. For me, 2 strands of fingering equals worsted. Like, I don't get a DK weight gauge when I hold 2 strands of fingering held together. I much easier get a DK weight gauge if I hold 1 strand of fingering with 1 strand of mohair. If I hold 2 strands of fingering together and try to get a DK weight gauge for a DK weight sweater, for example, it would just be really dense. It would be a dense fabric that isn't my favorite personally. But if your gauge is different, you know, if you knit looser or tighter, or if the fingering weight yarn you're using is thinner or thicker, you know, that'll differ. But for me, that's my experience. And then one of my squares, I don't know which one it is off the top of my head, but one of the squares I used a worsted weight yarn to sort of like test to see if I could use worsted weight for this project, and then I would have more yarn to pull from and I can make a bigger blanket. But maybe I didn't even use it because I'm not spotting it easily here because I didn't like it. Oh, I know it was this one. That's worsted weight. You can't tell from looking at it, but I could tell, you know, when I was making them that it was just ending up a little bit bigger. And so I decided to I still used it in my blanket. I didn't, you know, waste any of my squares. I used every single square, but I decided to keep it at just mostly, almost exclusively DK weight. So there you have it. And then the way that I lined them up, I really tried not to overthink it. I just put them all in stacks. Like I decided, okay, 80, I'm going to go 8 by 10. And I laid them out in a way that I thought was appealing to me. Oh no, that's how I determined the size. Okay. I laid them out 8 by 10. I was like, that's a great size. That's perfect. And then what I did is I then made stacks by color, not necessarily 8 stacks of 10 or 10 stacks of 8. I just kind of went with the flow of the color and then started top to right. And then like when I top left to top right and then went down a row, boom, boom, boom. So like it could be like yellow, 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 orange, 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 red, red, pink. Like, so when you're going vertically in the left column, they don't necessarily line up as smoothly as they do when they're going horizontally, but actually like this is a vertical row that you're seeing, because I did it the short row, and it's like, see, you've got a green next to an orange there, whereas the yellows that like blend them are all over here. But like it works. Do you know what I mean? I guess what I'm trying to say is don't overthink it. Like I tried a whole bunch like where I went kind of diagonally, like from top to bottom, kind of trying to make all the colors really go smoothly together. And I've done this type of project before. When I knit my polygon blanket by Tin Can Knits, it was almost exactly the same sort of process. And you just sort of throw them down, do it as nice as you can, and then just leave it. Like you can fuss and move things around until the cows come home, and like I kind of feel like usually the first layout is the best, and that in slightly imperfect makes it more interesting. So there you go, that's this blanket. I will link the exact Starburst Granny Square pattern that I used in the description box down below, but there's a lot of beautiful squares. You could do this. You know, you don't have to use a square either, just knit a square and whatever beautiful crochet motif you like. Crochet a square, not knit a square, and then match or stitch them together. And then I just used white and I did a row of, I think this is maybe single crochet. I don't know the crochet terms. A small crochet, little edging. And I absolutely love it. To me, this blanket is pure joy and it delights me. So the other thing I mentioned actually, that another project that I love to knit when I am feeling sort of unmotivated is baby sweaters. And I used to do it more before I had my own kids, actually. Before I had babies to knit for, I would knit just like baby sweaters and stash them so that when I needed one, like for a friend or something, I would have one ready, because they're just such fun little knits. And I'm not unmotivated at the moment, but I do have a baby sweater on the needle. So sometimes I knit them too, just because I like them. Dun, da, da, da. Look at that little cutie. So I'm almost done. Just got to finish the sleeve. I'm like halfway through the ribbing on the second sleeve. And then I think I'm going to address the neckline. I'm not happy with, I find it really, really wide. This is the Flax pattern by Tin Can Knits, and I do find that it has a pretty wide neckline. So I think what I'm going to do, see, I was so worried, of course, in the beginning of like managing the color stripes, and so I did the ribbing at the top. I cast on exactly how the pattern calls for, and then I did the ribbing in just the one color, and then when it switched to the second color of blue, I started the stockinette stitch. And so the ribbing is just really small. I think, even though this is knit top down, it's going to be a bit fussy, but I think I'm going to try to undo the ribbing. Like, and since it's knit top down, you can't like just unravel it. I'm going to have to carefully pick out the ribbing and then knit it in stockinette stitch, like kind of continuing the pattern from the body. I'm not sure exactly how. I'm just going to fudge it and then make it the neck a little bit smaller, and then I'm going to have enough of the main color to knit the collar in the purple. So I'm going to remove this ribbing in the dark blue, make that stockinette stitch and do a couple of decreases in that section, and then do ribbing in the, I was also, of course, I raced through this. I spent the entire time worried I wasn't going to have enough yarn, and I've got like plenty left. So it's adorable. This is, of course, the Gauge Dye Works sweater yarn. I haven't seen it available on our website recently, but I could be wrong. And this is in a cashmere blend. It is the most beautiful sweater for a baby. And I'm knitting the size 1 to 2. So I've previously used this yarn twice, and I knit smaller sizes. So that's why I wasn't sure, how far I was going to go, but it's perfect for the size 1 to 2. So delightful. Haven't knit a little wee sweater in a while, and pretty pumped about that. The next project that I'm excited to cast on is in our Willow DK. I've chosen the Sea Breeze colorway, and I'm gonna knit my Terra Nova, my new Terra Nova pattern, sleeveless, so with short sleeves. And I'm gonna knit it in the Willow DK in Sea Breeze, and I'm really, really excited. I think it's gonna be beautiful, and I'm gonna take some videos while I'm doing it. I've gotten a bunch of questions, maybe like from 3 or 4 knitters who are knitting it, who the setup, whenever you're knitting a top-down sweater with short row shaping around the neck, and because it has the cables at all the raglan, there's a lot to keep track of, right? Like there's kind of a bunch going on. And so I'm going to take some video. So anyway, so the questions that I've gotten from knitters are just people who are having a hard time visualizing it. And this is something like it happens all the time. Sometimes you don't need to be able to visualize it. You just need to do what the pattern says, right? Pay attention to the brackets. If it says, you know, work what's in the brackets twice or whatever, that's something that has come up for somebody where, you know, she couldn't get it. She couldn't get it. And it was because she was only doing it once, whereas there were brackets there. Anyways, all that to say, I do find that a lot of times knitters will send me a pattern question where they haven't necessarily even started knitting it yet, but they just don't see how it's going to work. And sometimes, I mean, obviously it can be super helpful if you can visualize what you're doing, but other times, you don't need to be able to visualize it because the designer visualized it and wrote it. So just follow the instructions, stitch for stitch, you know, count your stitches, do what it says. And then when you're done the short row section, it'll be smooth sailing. That's the hardest part, you know, in any top-down construction, usually, unless there's something crazy going on at the bottom. But the reason I bring that up is only because since I'm going to be knitting it again, I think I'm going to try to do some tutorials. Now, I've never done that before. So the thing that I'm a little bit uncertain about is like, how do you do it without giving away the pattern for free? You know what I mean? Like, so I'm just gonna, I guess if I just don't give stitch counts, right? Like it's fine. Anyway, I'm sure I'll work it. I'll figure it out. So look forward to that. Hopefully I'll be able to have something to reference you to if you're having any trouble with the setup, because I'm going to videotape it. And I hope I can be, you know, helpful and like clear in how I describe it. And I'm really excited. I don't think I have a sweater in this color. And this is for sure like one of my all-time favorite colors. Sea Breeze is like super bright turquoise. Light turquoise is like really one of my faves. And I'm just shocked that I haven't knit myself a sweater in it yet. So let's fix that soon. And there you go. So that's what's on my currently on my needles, the little baby sweater, soon to be on my needles, my new sweater. And that's really all I had to talk about in terms of my active projects at the moment. So I'm going to answer a question, and I know I don't have to read it. I know the question that I'm going to answer, and I'm going to do my best to be concise. So this is the thing. The question was, can you clarify the dye to order system versus the new system that I've just implemented, which is inventory based? And I have realized recently, I've been talking about that on my Instagram stories and in my newsletter, like I've been giving people a heads up that we're about to switch our system, the way that our inventory is managed on the website. And I have realized in talking to people about it, people who know my business really, really well, who have been customers for a long time, people like my own family, like my cousin, who is really, you know, she's personally invested. She knows a lot about what we do here. And like, I've really overcomplicated things by trying to tell people that I'm doing this because nobody knew we were a dye to order system before. Nobody has noticed that we've switched to an inventory only system now. So it was sort of like, I really made things, this is a me problem, me saying like, heads up everybody, look out, we're switching. Like nobody cares. So nevertheless, because one person asked, I will explain it and I will try to be concise. Basically, it's this. Over the years, we have had, for the past 16 years, a dye to order system for our core collection of yarns. Now, our core collection, it used to be really clear what was in our core collection because on the website it was divided in that way, where we had our core collection is our pure wash yarns. So pure wash sock, pure wash fingering, pure wash DK, pure wash worsted, and pure wash chunky. And those 5 yarns formed our core collection, and they were available in, I believe it was 31 core collection colorways. At times it was way more. Like 5 years ago, 3 years ago even, it was like 64 colorways. And because it's not possible for me to have 64 colorways available in essentially unlimited quantities, you know, the quantities that anybody might ever need at any time, in all 5 bases available at all times, because I just don't have the space to store all of that. We did a dye to order. So I would list essentially unlimited. My website had unlimited amounts of them listed. And you would order, for example, 8 smoke worsted to knit yourself a sweater. The order would come in, I would write it down on a list, and we would dye it. And then we would send it to you. And if you only ordered 3 smoke, I would still dye a batch of, we dye in batches of up to 8. And so I would dye 8 smoke, and then I would have 5 left over. And so if somebody ordered 4 skeins of smoke the next day, well, I wouldn't have to dye it because I would have 4 in stock. If somebody ordered 6 the next day, I would have to dye a new batch because we always fill orders with yarn, skeins from the same batch. So even though it sounds like, wow, you must have been dyeing, you know, it's so much dye to order, we always had, inventory was just always in flux. We always had some available, not always everything that we needed for the order, but often a lot. And so oftentimes people would order, you know, 5 different colors, 1 skein of each, and we would have 1 skein of each in stock. So I wouldn't even have to dye for that. So the problem for me became an inventory management thing where we would have so much yarn in stock and it just wasn't really selling because, see, I'm already getting like off track here. That isn't really, it meant that we had to have a lot of yarn in stock at all times, if you know what I mean, because you never knew what order was going to come in. So we just always had to be ready. And then because those yarns over the years became the least selling thing that we sold, we were always working on other things. So we'll be working on, let's say, like a tweed yarn update or doing one-of-a-kind speckled colorways in the worsted weight. And while we're working on that, one order would come in for 8 smoke in worsted that we would have to dye. So it would really scramble into it would make it really difficult to plan, and it would mess a little bit with the week, like with what we were trying to do. And since those orders became fewer and fewer, people were shopping from the core collection less and less. Even though it seems like, well, it's not that big of a deal because it's not, you know, you're not getting that many orders, so it's not messing things up as much. It actually almost had the reverse effect because before we used to dye, let's say 4 days a week for the core collection for orders that were coming in, and then 1 day a week for one-of-a-kind skeins because our bread and butter was the core collection. And then over time, that has just really shifted where people seem to be really more interested in one-of-a-kind colorways, limited edition things, and kits. And so now we've switched to spending most of our time dyeing those one-of-a-kind things for updates, and then the small amount of things that come in from core collection dyeing feels more and more like it difficult to manage. And so everything is currently still available, but inventory only. So if I dye a batch of 8 smoke and somebody buys 5, then I have 3 left in stock. You know, it's inventory. And then I can dye another batch and list that, and then we'll have more. But doing it the way, and the reason why I say I've overcomplicated it so much and like nobody even noticed and nobody knows, is that only applied to the core collection of yarns. So our tweed sock, the Luxe Yak Silk DK, the willow, the mohair, the Highland DK, these yarns were not core collection to me. Nobody else knew what core collection was because it wasn't something that I made clear, obviously. But they weren't core collection. They were not always available, and they've always been inventory based. And so like the majority of the things, the listings that I have available on the website have always been inventory based and have always been available in, colorways that are sort of seasonal, things that we feel like dyeing. And when one sells out, if we don't want to dye it again, or, if we don't have, if we have something else that we want to dye instead, then we do. So that is just the approach that we're taking for the whole line of yarns. And it's a bit stressful, and I'll tell you why, is because I've really found that for our business, the way that things have moved is that it's shifted to, as I say, update based. And so like every week I send out a newsletter on Fridays, and it does feel very much like I have to have something new to announce in the newsletter. And that gets tiring, right? Like now sometimes it'll just be a restock, like, hey, we've restocked all the tweed yarn this week. Send out the newsletter, and like that's it. It's not always like a new kit or a new pattern or a new color. It doesn't have to be that much, but it does feel like I always have to have something. Whereas in the olden days, it was always just sort of maintenance. I didn't always feel like I was chasing something. I was just maintaining the colors that we already had. So things have just shifted. Our customers, the way they shop has shifted, and so we're shifting accordingly. And I don't think you're going to notice a big difference if you were somebody, who shopped from the core collection before. You'll still be able to, and they'll just be, hopefully orders will just ship quicker because we won't have to dye them. We always had a 2-week turnaround time, and I still have a 2-week turnaround time listed on the website. And that's more because we don't go to the post office every day. We generally go to the post office about once a week. So that just builds in sort of time. Like if something comes up, because we're a family business, it's just my husband and I. So if something comes up in the family, if we have a personal thing, we need more time to, built in for that. So that is that. I don't know if I've just made that more complicated or less. I was explaining this to my cousin over the weekend, and she was basically just like glazed. So the past 10 minutes may have just been completely confusing, but maybe it was also more clear. The reason why I'm able to do things like we recently did the Paul Klee sweater kits, and then which we'll have again in the future, and the striped tee kits that I talked about last week, and that's because I don't have to spend so much time working on like maintaining. Anyway, it's because we're making more time for stuff like that, and I think that's it's where we're at right now. It's what we want to be doing. And so that's what that's about. I hope that helps. Maybe not. Let's move on to another question that's less complicated to explain. The next, this is an interesting one. It says, it seems you could live anywhere. Why have you settled where you are? And that's true. We have settled. Okay. This is an easy question for me to answer, and the answer is super simple. We live here because this is where both of our families live. I have 2 siblings and my parents who live in Montreal. My husband's mother and sister also live in Montreal, so both my husband and I have one brother who does not live in the city, but the rest of our families do, and families comes first. And we have really close relationships with them, and we cherish those relationships. And anytime we've thought about moving, that's why we don't. And because we fantasize about moving to Nova Scotia predominantly all the time. We have a cottage in Nova Scotia. We love it so much. We feel a really strong connection to there. I grew up sort of there. And but our families live here. And at the end of the day, this is where we have settled. And I suspect, never say never. We don't know. We can move our business anywhere in Canada, probably. You can't just move anywhere. But we like where we are. We're really happy where we are now. For years, I tried to convince Chris that we should move. And it was sort of because of this. Like, you could live anywhere. And it felt like we didn't choose to live here. We just ended up living here because this is where we grew up and it's where our families are, right? So we just never left. And I was like, we need to be more proactive. Like, we need to make choices for ourselves. And we can choose to live anywhere. Let's make a choice. Let's choose exactly where we want to be. And, but where we want to be is where our families are. So that's why we live here. We don't live in the city proper. We live outside in a suburb, And also, for a long time, I tried to, it sort of took a while. We both grew up in the suburbs. we ended up in the suburbs, and we ended up in the suburbs after living downtown because we needed more space for the business. And I'm just really well suited to quiet suburban life, if I'm being totally honest. I really like it. It's quiet. We have space. Go for walks. We've got lots of parks, green space around us. Go biking. We've got little places to go to that we can, and I just love it. And I love having somewhere to park reliably. And it makes it really easy to have like yarn deliveries. When we lived in town, it was a lot more complicated, or just, yeah, it was more complicated, and that was something that I didn't enjoy. So yeah, it's not the most exciting thing in the world, but it's really nice. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like we made this really like adventurous decision and ended up somewhere perfect for us and like really created our own life. No, we didn't do that. We ended up living like within kilometers of where we both grew up. And, but we're super happy here. So I guess it all worked out. I feel like that's it for today, guys. Kind of a short one, just answered 2 not really specifically knitting questions, and talked about an old thing that I made. So that's the struggle with doing an episode every week. I don't always have hot gossip for you. You know what I mean? Like, there's not always something new and exciting, but it's still knitting. It's still yarn, and hopefully that's good enough. So thank you very much for tuning in once again, and maybe I'll have a new sweater on the needles next week to chat with you about. Bye.